Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. It has been a pretty good week when it comes to new information about EVE Online, because not only did we get a mass test where CCP is testing out some fixes when it comes to desyncing of your ship position, we also got several dev blogs talking about basically a roadmap for some of the things that CCP is working on. Now, the first one I think had everyone a little bit worried. It was called something like skills on demand, and I think everyone, when they read that title, jumped to the conclusion that they were gonna just straight up sell skills for real money, but that's not the case. Nobody panic. It was basically that for newer players they were going to allow you to buy access to certain skills straight from your character sheet. Makes sense. I still remember my early days when looking for a certain skill book was something that was very far from intuitive. The other one I think that's major is the roadmap for the war deck mechanics that are going to massively change, and I think everyone is generally quite positive about what CCP is planning to do there. So the attacker will have to basically create an HQ somewhere in highsec, which, well, once it's destroyed would actually end the war as well, giving the defenders an option to maybe hire mercs or to go after a certain objective in order to clear the war, in order to get rid of the war. And of course for the attackers it basically gives them a means of creating a place where conflict is much more likely all of a sudden. So very, very cool. I personally like those two dev blogs a lot, especially the one about the war deck changes. And then of course we also got an update on the 64-bit client with DirectX 12, I think it was. We should be able to take a look at that next week if you want to. Not on CC, not on Singularity, but I think it was on the Duality test server. I personally am planning to get a new graphics card pretty soon, so I think I'll wait for that before I jump in on the testing of the 64-bit client myself. But I am very curious to know how the client will feel, how it will work, and what the potential will be of that change. So yeah, lots of news. We were kind of starving for that, but CCP did come out with quite a bit of interesting information. As always, let's take a quick look at the new Eden store as well. No longer themed around Valentine's Day. We get lots of bundles right on the front page. A lot of these do look absolutely great, but personally, what I do when it comes to skins is if I buy a new ship and then decide to fit it, then I just go and look from the ship fitting window at all the skins that are available, try to find some cheap ones on the market. That's usually how I buy my skins myself. They have to be super amazing for me in order to actually go and buy them from the New Eden store. Is a Spectral Shift bundle that does look pretty cool, for instance. 800 plex though, decently expensive, but that is for everyone to decide. Of course, some of these do look quite nice, and so it's the bundles front and center this week. Next up, let's just move into the market. Of course, that's why we are here. So we're gonna move to some plex and stuff at 3:30. Like that. Yeah, not good news for people that are looking to plex their accounts. Almost 3.9 million in GTA 4.4, which is also the price that I'm using for the ticker. I'm just trying to get that consistency in. Let's take a quick look at the player-owned trade hubs. Almost 3.8 million, and so on the price history, 1 year high point. I would say all-time high point. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I do get the feeling that we've never been this high for plex, and so do that times 500, and we are approaching the 2 billion mark for 30 days Omega. We are also starting to see the first posts on Reddit and things like that complaining about plex prices, trying to point a finger, do more of this, do less of that if you want plexes to go down. I think it's kind of funny. It's a pattern that we do see come back from time to time when plex are on a massive rise like this, and it is a pretty massive rise here. Since September we've basically gone straight up from 2.75 million to 3.8 million practically. That is definitely pretty expensive for newer players as well, and so I do understand where the complaint posts come from, but when those start to show up, that is when I start to look for the peak. So that does mean that it's a great time to sell plex if you want to get some liquid ISK for them, and I'm I'm starting to look for that turnaround and then that slow down trend towards the summer, where you eventually get, well, here you can see June, July, August, and were the best times apparently, I think, to try and buy some cheap plex, unless there was like some sales before here around FanFest. Stuff like that can happen as well, but I think that's here April, May. So yeah, plex at the 1-year high, probably the all-time high. Super expensive, a great time to sell, not a great time to have to plex your account, of course. For the multiple pilot trading certificate, we've got the same pattern, of course, also reaching that 1-year high. Currently selling for almost 2 billion ISK. There you go, 1,925,000,000 ISK. That's even more expensive, I think, than 500 plex at this point, which I think will indicate more increased pressure, at least for a little bit longer, for plex. And will we reach the 2 billion mark, excuse me, and thus the 4 million mark? That is the question I think that everyone can ask themselves. I'm not sure, but considering where the multiple pilot trading certificates at, which are not even that popular, have to be said here though, look at the margin between the buyers and the sellers. That is pretty massive. 1.8 billion and then more than 1.9 billion for the sellers. That is pretty massive. So this is the gamble. I personally do think that we'll start to see a top form at some point in the upcoming weeks, maybe even a little bit longer than that. But if the pattern holds up, we are starting in a weird spot compared to last year. I have to be honest on that as well. So it's not a very uniform or very easy to read market. It's basically a great time to sell. Can you imagine for the pilot training certificates, if you bought these for less than a billion ISK, sometimes even I think less than 900 million ISK, and you can now sell them for twice that price. That is not bad. The bad news though is look at the volumes. Those keep decreasing. At some point something is going to give here, and those decreasing volumes might, well, not in the plex prices, but they again still have a bit of margin to go to catch up to the training certificates. At some point this is going to stop because just nobody is going to buy these training certificates at those prices anymore. Very interesting situation. I thought we'd be here a bit sooner than that, maybe at this stop here, just below 1.8 billion, but no, market is being driven up even more. For the skill extractors, same thing, getting across the 430 million mark, 425 for the sellers in the player-owned trade hubs, and then in Jita 438 million ISK, which means that the average price actually manages to crawl above 430 million. Buyers coming in at 421 to 422. Which is quite expensive as well, which is actually not a lot of margin, especially in the player-owned trade hub. So again, 1-year high point, if you happen to be trading in these, all you needed was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and a bit months of patience, and you're looking at a pretty damn good trade here. For the skill injectors, I think that continued pressure should continue the pressure there as well, but we see a little bit of hesitation at the tail end to go across 900 million ISK on the chart. Sellers are coming in at 899,700,000 ISK, so let's call it 900 million ISK, and then the buyers coming in at 885. That's definitely pushed up quite a lot as well. Super expensive, and here we actually only needed 1, 2, 3, 4 months of patience to be able to sell at a massive markup from 700 million to 900 million ISK. Not bad at all. Yeah, again, nice sell opportunity here. What should be noted is, I think, that we are slowing down on the increased price of the injectors. For the small scale injectors, same thing. In fact, a little bit of a pushback in the last couple of days when we reached 180 million. We're still there for the sellers, almost 181, buyers at 174, and basically average prices dropping just a little bit in the last couple of days. So it's going to be interesting to see how close to a top we are getting. Volume wise, to my surprise, this is actually holding very strong in the small scale injector market. For the large scale injector market, it's a little bit less here in January, but overall this is still holding to decent numbers, 5,000 or so being traded every single day. Finally, we have the daily alpha injector that does pretty much the same thing, but of course compared to its average for the year, that's much less pronounced. So we are talking 68 almost 70 million for the sellers in Jita. In the player-owned trade hubs, we still have some small sellers coming in at less than 69 million ISK, and then the buyers coming in at 64. Again, couple of months waiting after that CCP sale with the massive volumes, and it's a great time to be selling right now. Volumes are also doing decently well, actually. It's really the multiple pilot train certificates, which have of course risen to an incredible 1.9 billion ISK on the seller side, that have dropped in volumes massively. So we'll have to keep an eye on that in the upcoming weeks, I think, to see if the pattern repeats itself. I do think that with multiple pilot train certificates, the hunger for plex sellers will be to go up towards that 4 million price as well. But how sustainable will that be for the market? Probably not very, as we can see here on these volumes dropping. Yeah, if you can though, and I think lots of people can, then this is, in my opinion, the right time to be selling. Next up, we have the minerals coming in at 10.45. Like that. Let's take a quick look here. Titanium, a little bounce up, so trying to stay away from breaking that 4.5 ISK barrier. It's not a great price, but at least it's managing to maintain its price for a couple of months now. We have to go for Jita to that. 469 now for the first seller. 441 still for the buyers. The buyers are trying to stay below 4.5 ISK, but the sellers are trying to get that price up a little bit. 1.1 billion, 2 billion units here. Not seeing anything too crazy, but unfortunately, my expectation is that this will get filled very quickly with big volumes. I don't think that this increased price here is here to stay. 4.5 ISK seem to be where the market bounces around. Basically, once it gets broken on the seller side, that's when we'll have to be careful. But for now, it's managing to maintain a price above that, so I would say still pretty decent compared to especially lots of the other minerals. To go for titanium again, we've also made that video about this mineral. It is a bit unique in that it's such a pain in the butt to have to transport it massively across large distances, and as a result, it does command a bit of a premium, especially if you need it locally. For pyrite, not a bad comeback, but keep in mind where we come from. Less than 3.3 ISK here on the lowest point in December. Manages to get back to almost 4 ISK now, and we are selling them for 394, 376 for the buyers. But what I'm fearing mostly is exactly this: a billion units, 1.5 billion units. So we climbed our way back towards 4 ISK, but then the volumes will start to come in to crush this pretty quickly, in my opinion. Next up, we have Mexalon that is staying on the slow burn. Here again, also 1 year low point, very close to that, below 60 ISK. It's not great. 59.08 for the sellers, 55.72 for the buyers. Volumes, of course, on this decreased situation are a bit lower, 150 million to 50 million units in these Mexalon packages. But overall, I think that it's still one that, historically speaking, has managed to maintain its value somewhat. And it is also known, at least in the last couple of months and years, that Mexalon has been the major bottleneck when it comes to nullsec production. So if they go full bore, if they try to, basically if they can't mine themselves all the minerals that they need, so they for instance need to replace titans and things like that, then the first bottleneck becomes Mexalon for nullsec, which does mean that it was able to command a massive premium like 80 ISK, which even historically speaking was a high price for Mexalon, despite a very difficult situation for minerals at the moment, because of course the massive mining yields that the Roar calls now at the moment. So it has decreased. It's trying to hold on to 55 to a price between 55 and 60 ISK. It is doing so, and the pressure is not that high, so I think that it can manage that for now. There's basically enough interest from nullsec from time to time, I think, to pick up some Mexalon as well and bring it back in order to maintain this price. Next up, we have Isogen. That is definitely hesitating after a slow rise for 2 months. So we reached an all-time low of less than 15 ISK. Managed to come back a little bit towards 16, 17 ISK. We're still there, 17.16 for the sellers and 15.66 for the buyers. But you can see that 35 million here, 37 million here. People have been trying to take advantage of those slightly higher prices, and as a result, we're actually back under pressure at the tail end here. And then another one that would be decent, I think, to mine is Noxium. Not so much for its historical price here at the moment. It's actually very low, 300 ISK. I think I've seen Noxium sell for like 1100 at some point, but for its 1 year performance here, it has managed to do a really good job at maintaining its 300 ISK price level. So 308 ISK for the sellers, 290 for the buyers. I would say if you have to mine for some of these high ISK minerals, titanium, because it's still 4.5 ISK. Historically speaking, this is not a great price, but it's somewhat okay. Noxium, because it's the only mineral I would say that for the entire year has managed to pretty much maintain its price. And then Mexalon, because that one is still okay at 55 to 60 ISK a month. And if you want to be ready for, let's say, some null-stick destruction, then I think stocks of Mexalon make a lot of sense. Next up, we have Zydrine that is back on the decline, trying to land at 500 ISK here. 506 for the sellers, but 490 for the buyers. And then here 13 million units coming in. The rest of it is quite a bit lower. So I think that for now, the market wants to land at 500 ISK. And for Megasite, we get pretty much the same. Yep, exactly. Actually been there a little bit longer than Zydrine, and we're selling that for 510 ISK. Buyers coming in at 488, and here the volumes feel a bit more normal to me. 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 7 million, 3 again. So yeah, looks like the former null-stick minerals is what I'm calling them, because these can of course now be moon mined from 0.5 systems, are landing at 500 ISK. And I see a bit of stability as well. Noxium feels decently stable. Mexalon actually decently flat here. Titanium actually up a little bit. Yeah, perhaps we are here for a more stable mineral market for now. And that would mean that Megasite and Zydrine seem to be trading at around 500 ISK. And now we have the final one, which is Morphite, and that's a different story. It's tied to the Tech 2 economy, and we actually dive down apparently towards 7,250 ISK, 7,681, and the buyers coming in at 7,500. So there must have been, yeah, considering that these are coming in here in the last 24 hours, basically complete lack of demand, which drove the buyers down to a price of around 7,253 ISK, which is super cheap. But now some people have come in to plug that gap a little bit and said, you know, I'm happy with Morphite at 7,500 as an investment, and so we get these buyers that took place here. But in the last couple of days, apparently you could have grabbed some really cheap Morphite at around 7,300 ISK, which is so much below this entire chart that whoever did manage to make those purchases, I think, is looking at a very good investment when war breaks out. Next up, the PI segment coming in at 1750. Here I don't expect a lot of changes. We don't really have any announcements that would indicate stuff like new structures or anything like that. And I think fuels are doing their own thing. Right now, let's take a look at advanced PI materials. Try to get back to an average of 2.1 million. Managed to do so for a little bit, but look at that, back under pressure, back towards 2 million on average. So a bit above 2 million for the sellers, a bit below 2 million for the buyers. Basically, not enough interest right now in the advanced PI materials, and the main reason is not a lot of news when it comes to new structures. Lots of infrastructure is already up and running as well, of course. I think almost everything that a boss can do can now be done in structures, and so it's got to be something really special for people to start to jump back on advanced PI materials, which means that if you do expect such an announcement to come out, you can look for buy opportunities like these, try to grab some broadcast notes for less than 2 million ISK, and be ready with your investments as well. I would always recommend that you do so at a pretty slow pace, so that you have plenty of time to scope the market out. Construction blocks next, trying to get back, but still right around 11,000 ISK, a bit above that. It's still below average, I would say. 11,800 ISK for the sellers and 11,000 for the buyers. A bit of a below average price still. Consumer electronics, try to get back. Very nice little comeback here to 14,000 ISK, which does mean that if you bought at the low point, which ticker I did here for 10,700 ISK. You had a nice little sell opportunity at 14,000 ISK, but it didn't last long. We're landing at 12k again, 12,700 for the sellers, 12,350 for the buyers. Okay, actually I have to put that at a little bit less than average if we take the entire 1 year chart in account. I thought we were closer to the average, but looking at this 1 year chart, it's not the case. Coolants then, man, that is crazy. That is really crazy. And at this point, I'm just gonna give you guys my gut feeling. Unsustainable. This cannot keep going for very long. We have yet another leg up for coolants, breaking through the 15,000 ISK barrier, now selling for 16,800 ISK. Buyers coming in at 16,000 ISK as well. Super expensive, 1 year high. If you have them, sell them. And personally, I think this cannot be sustained. A full increased price over 1 year with a double spurt up here at the tail end. No way that's very healthy. So it's kind of a crazy thing that's happening here, but yeah, an incredible sell opportunity, of course. Now, that increase in price here in those couple of months, you can see quite slow, quite steady. There is a very logical reason for that. Keep in mind that a little bit before this, we had the introduction of lots of the new structures that would replace lots of the uses for POSes, and was it the moon mining changes? I think it was the moon mining changes where the refineries came in to replace basically all POSes on moons in Nullsec, which meant that we had this massive drop in usage of fuel for a little bit, which needed time to recover as people build their infrastructure back up. But here at this end, that is kind of crazy. Coolants up to 16,800 ISK for the sellers. 1 year high point, crazy good price. Enriched uranium is doing almost the same thing, right? Again, reaching a high point as well, 16,000 ISK here, 15,700 to 800 for the sellers. Some are actually at 16k, and then buyers coming in at 15,100. Fuel-related PI material, 1 year high point yet again. Integrity response drones, that's an advanced PI material. Back on the other side here, down to 2.25 million, 2.4 for the sellers, 2.26 million for the buyers. Basically on these buyers, you are grabbing them well below average again. And then mechanical parts is for fuels, and here we see the first one that doesn't manage to maintain that high point. Went up to 13,800 ISK, but has to give back a little bit of ground. 12,300 ISK is still a very respectable price, especially if you look at this 1 year chart. Buyers coming in at 12,100 is a super narrow margin as well, so you're selling and buying these very quickly at a more than decent price. But yeah, this doesn't feel like it's gonna last too long, so keep that in mind. Nuclear reactors next here. I wish that volatility would increase. For a little while it looked like it might, right, with bottoms at 82,000 and then a peak here at 110,000. That was a nice little potential trade to be made, but now we can see that we're basically still hovering in that 90 to 100,000 ISK most of the time, selling now for 100,000 ISK, buyers coming in at 88,000 ISK. Unfortunately, we're not seeing the increased volatility which would allow us to make trades in nuclear reactors. Organic mortar applicators getting back to 1.1 million, but not willing to go well above that. You can see the 5-day moving average moving back down already. 1.1 million for the sellers and a bit below that for the buyers. Robotics next, and that one is definitely interesting. If I look at these data points here, 94,000 ISK all of a sudden, definitely a decrease in price from 100,000 ISK. Sellers still at 100,000, but it's the buyers that are starting to not show up anymore. 92,400 for the buyers of robotics. Give that a bit more, get down to less than 90k, and you've got yourself a nice buy opportunity, in my opinion. Self-harmonizing power cores, continuing the downtrend as well, now straight through 2 million. Less than 2 million for the sellers. You can see the lack of buyers here again. Less than 1.9 million for the buyers. If I would want to make an investment for advanced PI materials, self-harmonizing power cores looks to be in the right spot. Superconductors, basically on its average, definitely a weird one for the year. A bit of the odd one out that has maintained its price for the year, has known a little bit of volatility and basically went nowhere. 12,600 for the sellers, 11,500 for the buyers, right on its average. Test cultures next, staying at 8,000 ISK at the moment. Investment worthy, I don't think so, seeing where we did before. So it's 8,500 for the sellers, 7,800 for the buyers. There's not a lot of buyers though, and buying below 8,000 ISK is not that bad on the charts, but how long will we have to wait for that to turn around? Very difficult to say. And then finally we also have wetware mainframes that in right at the start of February went to that nice low point of less than 2.1 million on average, back up to 2.25, but looking at this entire 1 year chart, I think we're still trading below average. 2 million, 265, 266, a little bit up here, but the bars are staying below 2.2 million ISK here. So yeah, the PI picture is still the same. We've got this division between fuels that are doing really well, except for robotics all of a sudden, and then anything tied to advanced PI material I think is basically still trading below average. And then this coolant double spurt is quite a surprise, quite an opportunity, but I don't think it can last too long. Next up, advanced moon materials coming in at 25.40. Like that. Let's take a look at these. I think it's more stability, unfortunately. So here we have the crystalline carbonites that are slowly dipping back down, but not yet playing with the 150 mark, 158 for the buyers. So that's a bit low, but we can see that it is still under pressure. Ferrite carbide, that is interesting though. 1 year low point landing at 140 or something like that. Yeah, selling in fact for less than 140 ISK. Buyers coming in at 130 ISK. Very, very pronounced 1 year low point for ferrite carbide, and I would say a very pronounced buy opportunity. Quick look at the F here, don't have any. Should definitely make a move on that in my opinion. Next up we have titanium carbide, basically stable at 175. Would love to see it lower. Bars are below 170. But yeah, bit of pressure again then, 175 on the chart, actually trading for around 170. So again, bit of pressure here on that stability in Nalsec in my opinion, but I wouldn't want to make a move on that. And then we have tungsten carbide, same thing here, last couple of days. You can clearly see the pressure as it tried to get back to an average of 225. It's already selling back for less than 200 ISK and buyers at 186. So yeah, any increased prices here don't last long. A bit like with the minerals, any of these opportunities get squashed by massive volumes very quickly, driving the price back down. But unlike minerals, we're actually hovering at below average prices, but not close to the bottoms for most of them. Ferrite carbide being the very pronounced exception here. Next up we have the metamaterials, photonic metamaterials, also under pressure. And you know, here if we have a data point actually at 15,750 ISK, that is very low. Let's take a quick look here. 16,700 for the sellers, 15,900 for the buyers. So I mean, you're buying for less than 16,000 ISK. That's maybe something to keep in mind. But for me personally, it's kind of a weird spot where I'm not sure if I would invest in these metamaterials just yet, unless it becomes as pronounced as ferrite carbide. So let's take a look at that then. Plasmonic metamaterials also are dipping down, playing with 17.5k. Data point here at less than 17,000 ISK. Interesting. 18,244 for the sellers, but a decent margin down to 16,871 for the buyers. Buyers coming in at less than 17,000 ISK. If we try and make that happen on the chart right there, that is another pronounced buy opportunity. So it looks like tied to Minmatar market here. Ferrite carbide, plasmonic metamaterials are at 1 year low points and can definitely be considered for purchase. Next up we have the terahertz metamaterials that are actually also down a little bit in the last couple of days, but managing a pretty good price of 25,700 ISK for the sellers, 24,900 for the buyers. Around average, maybe even a touch above average for the sellers. Very interesting and definitely different situations between Amar, Minmatar tied materials here. Well, and this one super interesting. Next up we have the other materials, and here the general picture has also been that we are hovering at these below average prices. Basically ferronic condensate, went to 100,000 ISK, around its average, but the pressure is back on in the last couple of days, selling for 95k, buyers at 94k. Basically a bit below average. Ferrogel then also tried to get back to 50k, but last week or so back under pressure. Currently selling for 47,000 ISK, buyers at 45,000 ISK. a bit below average again. Full rights, same thing, except that its peak here is in mid-January, trading at around 1,000 ISK. Buyers actually down to 920. 920, not yet. I want to see this go a little bit lower, but again, trading below average. Hypersynaptic fibers, very much that same pattern again. Nanotransmitters, same thing. If this has any momentum, you gotta look out for that 4,500 price mark, but with the buyers still at almost 4,600 ISK, it's basically still a bit too early to jump on this one. Phenolic composites, again, played with the bottom around February and late January, early February, jumped back up, but is now slowly under pressure again. Are the buyers close to 2,000 ISK? Yeah, there's actually at 1980. Okay, buyers for less than 2,000 ISK for these. You could try it. If you absolutely want more investments in advanced moon materials, then I would say phenolic composites are definitely a possibility as well. And then we've got the ceramic fibers, same pattern here, 400 as the bottom, landing at 450, buyers at 444. So that's again below average. Is the general vibe at the moment. Well, which on stability is of course quite normal. Basically have more supply when nobody is interfering with the moon mining activities in general. So there we go, advanced moon materials. This one's interesting, and as a result, this one is pretty interesting as well. Next up, we have the Tech 2 ships coming in at 31.15. Let's see if we can find some fun stuff. Usually for me, in the last couple of weeks and also in the years that I've been doing EVE Talk, ships that I like are of course ships that know some volatility. And that's the trades I'm looking at. And what seems to be working the most are stealth bombers and logistics ships. So let's keep that in mind as we get started here. First of all, the Ares Interceptor, very stable at 27.5 million ISK. So that one is 25 million for the buyers. Basically super cheap at the moment, but I wouldn't call that a massive investment opportunity. The Basilisk though, that one is showing that volatility that I was talking about, with low points down to 200 million ISK and high points at 300 million ISK. You can do some trading on that, and here at the tail end we are basically landing at 220 again, 270 million for the sellers and 203 for the buyers. If you're looking for those Tech 2 trades, well, look at this Basilisk chart, and yeah, you're in the right spot to try and buy just above 200 million ISK. Sounds pretty good to me. Next up here we've got the Cerberus, heavy assault cruiser, a bit more stable, below average at around 250, 257 for the sellers, 240 for the buyers. Basically here we've got a slightly below average Cerberus at the moment. The Crow, a little bit of volatility. Interesting to see at least one interceptor show that. So high points of 35 million, low point of around 26 million, I'm presuming. Yeah, and then back up to 35. So here at the moment selling for 33 million ISK, buyers coming in at 28.5 million, which means that if you happen to have some of these cheap crows from early February, you can probably try to sell them at the moment. Then we've got another one with the Guardian that had a very nice spike here up to 300 million ISK as well, and a bottom of 200 million. Had to wait a couple of months for that, but we're back under pressure, so let's see how low we can go. 227 for the sellers, 209 for the buyers. It's quite a few of them, but once we get through these guys, and we're talking probably less than 30 ships, we're at 195 again. That's when we're here on the chart again, and that's when the purchase becomes interesting. And so this is what I like about the Tech 2 ship market, especially some of these more volatile ones. You do still, despite the calm nature of EVE Online at the moment, you do still have those trade opportunities in these Tech 2 ships. Next up we've got the Heretic. Ooh, is that for real? Here data point at 54 million ISK, sellers at 64, buyers at 41 million ISK, and this should mean that someone actually managed to snag one for 54 million ISK. Yep, Heretic, the filter doesn't change anything. Basically buyers dropping straight out of this market, and that is here at the 41 million. Not gonna be easy to pick any of those up, but you can see that you can test the prices towards for 50 million and try to grab some very cheap Heretics at the moment. That is kind of crazy to see a 23 million ISK difference between the sellers and the buyers of a ship. It's in Tech 2 as well, where the base price for the buyers is 40 million. That's more than 50% on the buyers and more than a third on the sellers. That's kind of crazy, and is a setup for lots of volatility, basically. Very interesting. Next up, we've got the Hound. Ooh, that is so nice. Look at that, trading for less than 30 million for a little bit. Currently selling for 38 million ISK. Buyers coming in at 35.7 million. And let's take a quick look at my ticker. 25.2 for my purchase. That means that I potentially have an easy 12 million ISK profit. 50% on my Hound trade. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna take a trip to Jita now, because this is one of those opportunities that I've been waiting for. And this is exactly why I check the Tech 2 market. Next up, we have the Ishtar staying below average here, breaking back through the 250 barrier. 238.6 million for the sellers, 224 for the buyers. Ishtar, just like the Cerberus, actually it's been a long time since I've flown my Cerberus. Perhaps I need to make a video on that one again, because it's a great ship and actually very affordable at the moment for these Tech 2 cruisers. Next up, we've got the Manticore that jumped up to 35 million ISK and has basically been trading there for now. 33.5 for the sellers, 32 million for the buyers, back on an average price. We've got the Munin that was actually at a 1-year low point last week. Went back up a little bit. You can see the volumes increased. So I think some people made their investments, and I don't blame you, but keep in mind, buyers are still below 220 million. So for the lucky ones that still try to compete at the price below 220 million ISK, you can still try to grab some Munins. Next up, we've got the Nemesis, also shooting back up to 30 million ISK, 30.5 million for the sellers, 27 million for the buyers. And if we look at the ticker here for my Nemesis, I bought those at 24.5 million. So I could make a small trade here if I wanted to. I'm personally going to wait for an actual breakout like this one for the Hound here as well. Means that I need to be a bit more patient. Sure, I've got that patience. We're checking these ships every week anyways. Next up, we've got the Oneros staying at 200 million. Is the big problem with the Oneros selling for 218, buyers at 191. That seems quite juicy. Nice little margin here, and it is logistics. The real problem are the volumes. You're just not trading a lot of these ships. So for that one, I would actually wait for the chart to really pronounce itself as well. I'll go down to like here for that to that 160 million mark, and then maybe buy one of them, because it's going to be very difficult to make active trades in these. A lot easier in, for instance, the Guardian, despite the fact that if I look at this volume, yeah, no, actually it's double. Yep, there you go. Guardian actually 50 is showing up right here, and then Basilisk is doing pretty good in volumes as well. So that's the problem with the Oneros. Then we've got the Purifier, shooting up as well, up to 40 million ISK, that's right. Well, 37 still for the sellers, 34 million for the buyers. Do I have any Purifiers? No, apparently not. That's too bad, but yeah, stealth bombers, logistic ships, really nice. So you get some sell opportunities in the stealth bombers, and I actually liked the Guardian a bit early, but the Basilisk at 203 is actually pretty interesting again as well. So next up, we've got the Saber that is diving down to 1-year low point at 65 million, 67 for the sellers, 59 for the buyers. Not as crazy as what was happening with the Heretic, with those buyers here, but definitely pretty cheap as well. Next up here, we get the Scimitar landing at 200 million ISK, selling for 203, buyers at 194. I would again be a bit careful on this one. You can see that the spikes are not that great in the last couple of months, but you are buying these for a price well below 200 million, well below the entire chart, and so Scimitar definitely looks kind of interesting as well. And then we get the Stiletto, which is Interceptor, pretty stable at 30 million, bit of pressure at the tail end, but nothing too special. So very good week, I would say, for Tech 2, especially if you're really active in that. You've got some buy opportunities in logistics ships, and you've got some sell opportunities in the covered up stealth bombers. Very, very nice to see that make a bit of a comeback. Next up, we have the Tech 3 ships coming in at 39.15. like that, and you probably already spotted that on the ticker, the Tengu doing a crazy increase to 200 million is all of a sudden a bit of a surprise, but it is something that I've been warning, those low volumes on the cruiser markets, that was potentially something that could happen. Now let's start with the destroyers. Here is the Confessor, actually down a bit in price to 37.5 million on the chart, selling for 38.7 million ISK, buyers coming in at 33.6, and the volumes, well, nothing close to the hundreds. We've got 15, 39, 27, so this is basically, I would say, maybe even a little bit less than what I would expect for the Confessor, especially on a slightly down price. Next up, we've got the Hecate, flat at 40 million for about 10 days now. 40 million for the sellers, 39 million for the buyers. Very narrow margin, and here we've got 26.39, but also 108 of them. This feels like the healthy volume, and then actually, now that I think about it, this is normal. Hecate selling for 40 million, you get a bit more. Confessor dipped down to 38.7 million, and you get a little bit less supply in that market right now. Let's see what the Jackdaw is doing, actually going up towards 50 million ISK, 48.7 for the sellers, 45 million for the buyers, and here 64, 95, another 39, another 58. People trying to sell some Jackdaws at that premium of almost 50 million ISK. I suspect that we'll see more Jackdaws come in as well in the upcoming week. And then finally we get the Zweepel, which is the least popular one, that is struggling to stay above 35 million ISK, 38 for the sellers, 33 for the buyers, and here, well, 83, 65, 88 as well, a decent amount of volume for the Zweepel, actually doing decently well. But once you go below 40 million, of course, you have that more reasonable amount of ships here. So there's definitely some market play happening, I think, with the volumes. Looking at this dry up for the Confessor is kind of weird. Looking at the fresh supply in the Jackdaw, that's actually kind of normal, and then the Hecate actually doesn't feel out of line. So I would say the destroyers are primed to keep hovering 35, 40 million, sometimes a spike up. Is it on a volume for the Jackdaw? You do have a little bit of volume increase here, but nothing that crazy. So yeah, very interesting market, but feels like it is well supplied and able to sustain itself. So any increase in price, I think, will get increased supplies, and thus they'll go back down decently quickly. And on average, we're looking at 40 million probably for these tactical destroyers. Now let's take a look at the cruisers. Here's the Legion, slowly going back down to 180 million ISK, 183 for the sellers, 169 for the buyers. But look at that, you've got 12 and 23, and then the others are definitely pretty damn small in volume. So it's still normal, but it's not a lot. You could very quickly cause disruptions in these markets. Next up, we've got the Loki, basically 240, something like that, 225, actually down a bit in price, 209, and volumes wise, again, you get a bit more, 16, 24, but overall these are not a lot of Lokis on the market. Definitely feels better than the Legion though. But then we get the Proteus, very flat at 175, something 172 for the sellers, 160 for the buyers. But look at that, 10, 20, 16, and that's basically it. You get people trying at 200 million with 68 of them, but this is not a lot of volumes where you have active trading happening at the moment. And then we have the Tengu, which went up to 200 million ISK here, so 196 for the sellers, 182 for the buyers. So all of this in the last 24 hours has been coming in to drive the price back down already from 200 to 196 million, but 15, 10, 10, and then you've got 1s and 5s and 2s and things like that. So the cruiser market is basically still primed for some volatility. You can see that the percentages are not so bad when it comes to some of these jumps, like the Tengu, for instance, here, buying for 170, sell opportunity at 200 million, because of the basically somewhat low volumes in the cruiser market. So my take on that is that we could basically still go either way, because of how stable the destroyers are at the moment in their volumes, and because we don't see any real drying up or anything like that in the cruiser market. We actually see some volatility here and there, but nothing too crazy. I think we could still go either way. More stability, more supply coming in, and thus driving the price down in general is possible, or Nelsec could come into action, and then we could see a lot more interest in these tech tree ships, which will then inevitably mean higher prices, at least on that higher demand, but also, in my opinion, lots of increased volatility as well. So the tech tree market is one where we have this longer horizon, in my opinion. Keep an eye on what's happening, but you need something to change in the game itself before this one becomes more volatile. Whereas the tech 2 ship market, for some reason, yeah, the logistics cruisers and the tech 2 bombers are showing some volatility all of a sudden. Very interesting stuff. And then finally, for the extra products, we're gonna take a look at freighters at 45 minutes. So we get ships, I think they're under capital ships. Freighters, let's take a look at the Providence. Has Burn Jita, basically my question is, has Burn Jita made an impact on these ships? So we get the Providence selling for less than 900 million ISK bars, coming in at 825. That's actually super cheap for a freighter. And the answer here for the Providence is basically no. You do have a little bit of an uptick here. Basically the downtrend has been stemmed for 2 days, but that's about it. Next up we've got the Charon. That one did dip to 900 million, almost a bit of an uptick, but we're already on the downtrend. So 965 million for the sellers, 873 for the buyers. Then we've got the Obelisk. Basically, you don't even see Burn Jita on this one. 900 million as well, 943 for the sellers, but 900 million for the buyers. And then we've got the Fenrir, that is also basically going straight down to less than 900 million ISK. We can take a look at the Bowhead as well. Ooh, that one actually jumped up a little bit to 1.1 billion. It's probably because it's a bit more rare. Yeah, trade volumes 5 to 10 a day. That's all, selling for 1.2 billion ISK. So it's in the Bowhead that we actually see, I think, a bit of a response from the market after Burn Jita. But in the freighters, nope, these guys are basically not moving on that, and that is very, very interesting. Basically, I think that what this shows is, well, you get the mineral market. Everything is super cheap at the moment when it comes to minerals, because everything is super abundant. As a result, Tech 1 ships are very cheap as well, and it shows lots of stocks basically slogging their way around the market. That even an event where the biggest group in the game burns down Jita for a whole weekend doesn't show up on the market stats for their prime target, which were freighters in Jita 4.4. That's kind of a crazy situation, and it does show you, in my opinion, the current meta in the game, you could say, economically speaking. We've got very abundant Tech 1 ships, very cheap minerals, very affordable ships. Plex, as a result, are through the roof because inflation is still a reality in the game as well. And then you've got a bit more volatility, some more games being played, but only in Tech 2 and the Tech 3 market at the moment. Makes for an interesting scenario. It's a situation that we find ourselves in, and the real question for me personally then is CCP happy with that? Is actually this their idea? It is absolutely possible if you think about it. Alpha clones, you want them to be able to grab Tech 1 ships and lose them and grab them again, because they're so cheap and so easy to gather that they can just, you know, have their experience and not feel like they need to do endless grinds to get into their ships. But once you get into the Omega clones, you get Tech 2, you get Tech 3, which is more expensive, knows more volatility, and that's where the economic games take place a little bit more. Whereas Tech 1 is basically suppressed by that super high volume of Tech 1 minerals coming into the game. And yeah, even Burn Jita could not move the needle on the freighter market. Very interesting. If you have any suggestions for next week for an extra product or something like that, definitely put that in the comments. It is always welcome. But other than that, that's gonna be it for this Eve Talk. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.